It's July 31st, 2023. I'm Todd Dunn, and today I'm doing a summary and ranking of the lobster roll restaurants I visited in July. During the month of July, I visited 4 places. I'm going to glance at my notes now so I get everything right. They are Hansen's Lobster Pound and Ice Cream in Bass Harbor, Maine, MDI Lobster and Barbecue in Southwest Harbor, Maine, Roddick's Takeout in Southwest Harbor, Maine, and the Traveling Lobster up north in Town Hill, Maine, near the north end of the island. Okay, let's look at my ratings and I'll talk about each of those 4 places and give you a rating for each one. The first place I went to was Hansen's Lobster Pound and Ice Cream. Now, they're located in Bass Harbor, Maine, right behind the Irving Station, which is Hansen's outpost. I think they're probably owned by the same people. They're easy to get to and have ample parking. So that was a plus. They have a sign right by the road that's been there all summer that says lobster rolls, $29.99. Sort of, mid to upper price range for July, but that's the price. So I went in and I bought a lobster roll. I bought the classic, which is a lobster roll with mayonnaise. It arrived relatively quickly, and I immediately noticed one big difference from all the lobster rolls I had ordered before, and that is that this one came with French fries instead of potato chips. They were good fries, no problem with that. When we tried the lobster roll, noticed immediately that it didn't have quite as much lobster as the other lobster rolls we've been getting. Now, the standard lobster roll is 4 to 4.5 ounces of lobster meat. And I noticed that Hansen's did not say how much lobster would be on the lobster roll. So, I can't slight them for not giving me what I thought of as 4 ounces of lobster meat. What they did was they put a fairly thick bed of chopped lettuce on the bottom of the roll, easily 5 or 10 times the normal amount of lettuce that I had been getting. And then they put the lobster on top of that. And I would say that there was probably 3, maybe a little bit over ounces of lobster on the lobster roll. And it had a lot of mayonnaise. I mean, much, much more than I prefer. So consequently, I ranked them down a little bit on my 10-point basis for the lobster part of the lobster roll and dropped them down to a 7 because there wasn't as much lobster as I expected and there was too much mayo on the lobster. What about the roll itself? Well, the roll itself was fine. It was a standard New England hot dog bun. It was well toasted, buttered. It was a decent roll. Wasn't a great roll, but it was a decent one. So, value-wise, I gave them a pretty low score, 5 out of 10, largely because there wasn't that much lobster on the lobster roll. And the lobster roll was a little bit on the expensive side. So, that just pushed their value rating down. What about location? Well, they're a roadside stand. They're not near the water. You can't see the water from there. And there's nothing else around there except the gas station. So, it's not a place that you would choose to stop other than to buy some seafood or some ice cream. They had 24 flavors of ice cream, which was nice. So I gave them a 3 out of 5 on location. So that gave them a total of 19 out of 30, which is the lowest rating I've given so far. Largely because I felt that they were a little short on lobster, too much mayo, and the location, and consequently the value was down, and the location was, just a roadside stand with nothing else there. It did have ample parking though. The next place I went was MDI Lobster and Barbecue on Clark Point Road in Southwest Harbor. Now this is associated with what used to be called Southwest Lobster, which is a lobster buying pier that buys lobster from lobster fishermen. And that's still there. It's under different ownership, and I don't know what it's called now. And the restaurant is right behind the lobster buying pier. So I went in, I ordered their classic lobster roll, and which is lobster meat with a little bit of mayo served on a bun with a little lettuce. And what I got was, once again, as soon as they handed me the package, I could tell it had French fries and not potato chips in it. The French fries smelled great, but I wasn't buying French fries. I'm buying a lobster roll. So we opened it up and had a look at it, and wow. Huge roll, maybe 2 ounces of lobster. Again, this is a place that didn't say how much lobster would be on the lobster roll, but wow, they really shorted the lobster, and it had too much mayo on it. So I ended up giving it 3 out of 10 because it was maybe half as much lobster as I expected, and it was relatively expensive. With sales tax, $33.43. So this is the second most expensive lobster roll I've purchased. And being generous, half as much lobster as I expected. So, they really fell down on that. The roll, well, it was a decent roll, pretty good roll, but I have to say this one was more roll than lobster. So I gave it 4 out of 5 on the roll because, it was a decent roll. Value, well, what can I say? Maybe 2 ounces of lobster, good French fries, but expensive. So they really failed on the value. I gave them 2 out of 10 just because there was basically nowhere near the amount of lobster that what I think there should have been on the lobster roll. And, wasn't that great a lobster roll because there was too much mayo. French fries, as I said, were good though. Location. Well, I gave it 5 out of 5 because it is right on the waterfront in Southwest Harbor. And, there are spots where you could go down and watch the lobstermen selling their lobsters to the lobster buying pier, and there were picnic tables right next to the water. You could sit out and watch the activities out over Southwest Harbor, which can be quite interesting, and you can see all the interesting boats cruising by. And they also had inside seating inside their big tent in case the weather wasn't so great, and there was plenty of parking, and it was easy to get in and out of because you're turning in off of a city street. So, good location. But when you add up all the scores, 14 out of 30, largely because the value just wasn't there and not enough lobster. So, this is by far the lowest score I've given, largely because they were expensive and they didn't give you much lobster. Now, let's move on to Roddick's Takeout. Roddick's Takeout is on the road that goes into Southwest Harbor from the north. That's Route 102. I approached it from Southwest Harbor, which meant I drove from downtown, basically out of town, past the grocery store, and just past the grocery store, Roddick's is on the right. And I went in, I ordered a classic lobster roll, And it arrived very quickly. Good service, 2-3 minutes, and I had my lobster roll. Even though they were a little bit busy, I had to wait a couple minutes to place my order. They also sell ice cream, and they had something like 25 or 30 flavors of soft serve ice cream and quite a few flavors of hard serve ice cream. But they have different people doing the ice cream orders and the lobster and seafood orders. So despite the fact that some people had just ordered like 10 ice cream cones simultaneously with me ordering the lobster roll, I got my lobster roll very quickly. It had a good amount of lobster, and it basically tasted like all claw and knuckle meat. So it was all very tender lobster, not the chewy tail meat. And it was sweet, well cooked. And the only thing I could fault it on was there was just a hint too much mayo. If they had cut the mayo down a little bit, it would have been perfect. So very good lobster roll, well cooked. Lobster tasted great, but just a little too much mayo. So I gave it 9.5 out of 10 on the quality of and amount of lobster. Very good. The roll, well, it was a standard New England hot dog bun. It was well toasted, buttered, a good bun. And the bun to lobster ratio was just about right. Basically, there was so much lobster that you had to watch that the lobster didn't fall off while you were eating it, which is the way a lobster roll should be. So value-wise, for the lobster roll with tax, that's $30.28, and which was the cheapest lobster roll I'd had so far in July. And so I gave it a 10 out of 10 on value because it was a good amount of lobster. It was well prepared and just a tiny bit too much mayo. And it was reasonably priced for a lobster roll. So 10 out of 10 on value. Location, well, this is the only thing I could really slight Roddick's for. They are off the main road, which at that point is a 40-mile-per-hour road, and it's a right angle turn from the paved road onto gravel. If you're coming from Southwest Harbor, it's a right turn, so it's not too bad. If you're coming into Southwest Harbor, it's a left turn across traffic, so you may have to wait a bit to get in. There was adequate parking, and but it's a ways from anything else, although, it's only maybe 2-3 minutes from downtown Southwest Harbor, so it's not really out in the middle of nowhere, but it's not near the water, so you can't look at the lobster boats and things like that while you're eating your lobster roll. The view is not that great. The seating, which was, fine. They had picnic tables set up fairly close to the road, and they also, up on the hill that there's on, they had more picnic tables and a sort of a counter set up with awnings over it, but the view was of the parking lot, so not a fantastic view location. On the plus side, if you're with your family, they just installed this year an 18-hole mini golf course, which looked pretty nice and was really busy. So you could come, get your lobster rolls, and the kids could play mini golf. So I gave them 3.5 out of 5 for location. Adding those up, 27 out of 30. And you can see Roddick's was because of a good lobster roll, good lobster, plenty of it, and a good price, was a good place to go. Much better than the first two I tried. Okay, the last place I went to was Traveling Lobster in Town Hill. Town Hill is right smack in the middle of the island. It's about as far away from the water as you can get and be on Mount Desert Island. And Traveling Lobster is at the north end of Town Hill, probably 1.5 miles from the north end of the island. It is, if you're going north, It's on Route 102, and if you're going north, it's a right turn off of paved road onto gravel, so you got to watch that. And if you're going south, it's a left turn across traffic, again on a 50-mile-per-hour road, so that can be a bit of an issue, and I'll get to that when I talk about the location. Okay, lobster roll was 25 bucks. With tax, 27. So this is the cheapest lobster roll I've purchased this summer. So that's a big plus right there. But that does reflect the fact that lobster prices at the lobster boat do tend to decrease as the summer goes on. So the lobster rolls I bought back in June for a little bit more money reflect a higher cost for the restaurant for the lobster. But I credit Traveling Lobster for, lowering their price to when their cost for lobster went down, which is good. What about the quality of the lobster roll? Well, there was tons of lobster on this one. It was nominally a 4-ounce lobster roll, and I would say they were nominal on that, but on the high side. I bought the classic again, which is a little bit of mayo on the lobster. You could tell when you looked at it that there was mayo, but you could just barely see it. There was just enough to give you the tang of the mayo and the flavor from it, but it wasn't really an issue anywhere. It was just right. And the lobster was good. It was a mix of claw, knuckle, and tail meat. Tail meat's a little chewier. Some people like that. Some people don't. But it was a very good lobster roll. Good value for the money. So I gave it 10 out of 10. As good as you get in terms of a lobster roll. The roll itself was also, good, a typical New England hot dog bun, well toasted and buttered. So 4 out of 5 there. It was nothing special, but it was what you would expect. And it had plenty of lobster on it. Again, the roll to lobster ratio was suitably low. So value-wise, cheapest lobster roll I've bought so far this summer. Good quality, plenty of lobster, so I gave it 10 out of 10. Because of those reasons. Location. This is the only place that Traveling Lobster falls down. I gave it 3 out of 10 because, one, it's nowhere near the water. In fact, it's nowhere near anything. If you don't go to Traveling Lobster to do anything but eat there. And it's a ways from everywhere, because of the way the roads are. The only time that it would not be a bit of a trip to get there is if you stop there on your way onto or off of the island. If you're staying over in Bar Harbor, it's going to be at least a 20, maybe 25-minute drive to get there just because of the way the roads are. Even though it's only about 7 or 8 miles from downtown Bar Harbor, it's going to be a bit of a drive to get there because you have to go kind of the long way to get there. And from any place else, it's going to be an even longer drive. But, it might be worth it. They did have a little bar where you could get a beer with your lobster, and they had ample seating and ample parking. But you go there to eat their seafood, not for any other reason. And that's pretty much it. They were, despite that, quite busy, but I got my lobster roll in like 2 minutes, despite the fact that they were very busy. So very quick, excellent quality lobster roll, excellent price. So I gave it 27 out of 30. The only difference between Roddick's and Traveling Lobster is I gave Roddick's a slightly better location rating because it's, just basically at the edge of the town of Southwest Harbor, so it's not that far from other things. And they do have the mini golf course there. And I gave Traveling Lobster a half a point more on the lobster, just because I felt that they really nailed the lobster quality. And Roddick's had just a little too much mayo. Traveling Lobster, on the other hand, just gave you a small bag of chips and no pickle. So that was a little bit disappointing. But still, the lobster roll is why I went there, and the lobster roll was great. So this month, 4 places: Hansen's, MDI Lobster, Roddick's, and Traveling Lobster. Of the 4, I'd say your best bets are Roddick's in Southwest Harbor, right at the north edge of town, and Traveling Lobster up on the northern part of the island. Both were very good lobster roll and well worth the money. Okay, that wraps up my lobster roll summary for July 2023. Thanks for watching.